Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta, no matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. It's Double Bill Thursday. Hope you enjoyed our earlier show with Kenny Ken. You can find that on the channel. And big breaking news this evening. And it just so happens we have the man who broke the news on the show. Squaddies, back together again. Let's rock and roll.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Did everyone enjoy their pee break? We are back and we are about to be joined. Hello, Squaddies, at ease. For those of you joining for the first time today, welcome to Squad Central. We just wrapped a show with Super Kenny Ken on Rogue versus Real. Kenny sharing his starting 11 for next season. Don't miss that. Please go check it out. For those listening on our audio platforms on Spotify and Apple, please leave a review. Please subscribe. And if you haven't already subscribed to the audio platforms, please make sure you do so. Our partners at Sports Social Podcast Network, we're forever grateful to them for making us part of their team. And we are here to grow our audio platforms in the 2025 and 26 season. So a subscription and a review will absolutely help us. So since we last spoke, and welcome to everyone in the house, let's try and get, Kenny was brilliant, Ian, 100%. Hello again to you, Adrian, as well. Ian back once again. Tammy, our chief like officer, please make sure you listen to her. Ryan as well. I need to make you, I'm trying to make you guys mods, and somehow I only found Albert's name for mods. So I need my mods. So we have to make that happen. Good evening to each and every one of you. Carol's back. By the way, how was that swim in Folkestone? Looked a bit gloomy today compared to other days. But yes, what are you guys talking about regarding crowns? Not quite sure what you're talking about. And also to our American listeners, happy July 4 Eve. Tomorrow is Independence Day, and many of you will be enjoying hot dogs and hamburgers. I certainly will as well. So yes, back again. Please remember to hit the like button. Just got a note from Ben with his breaking news. He's a man in demand. But I believe we have the YouTube exclusive that is coming right up regarding the Al NASSR offer of 85 million euros for Gabriel Martinelli. Why don't we do this before Ben gets here, everyone? Are you accepting that offer? 85 million euros for Gabriel Martinelli. And it's a little bit like, you know, I kind of liken this to films. So you watch an original film and you're blown away. You love what you see. The storyline's amazing, the threads, the arcs, all of the content. And then there's a sequel. And the sequel's kind of okay, but it's never as good as the original. And then they do another sequel and you start to think, man, it's a little bit disappointing. They've overdone it. It is not quite what the original was. I think there are a lot of Arsenal fans out there that feel like Gabriel Martinelli has not evolved the way he should, has not progressed the way he should, has not shown the talent, perhaps, that we had expected. Looks down too much, doesn't pass the ball quick enough, a little bit predictable on the flank. But at the same time, he does the things that Mikel loves that he does, winning duels defensively. But maybe our creative players have been stifled over the last season in that we haven't seen the best of them because of the way the manager wants to play. There's lots of different factors that kind of play into this. And I know that for us as fans, it's very difficult because we've always kind of been in a situation where we have players that we want to get rid of. But when you become a really good team and you have a great squad, there's going to be moments where you're going to lose players that you love. We saw that with Emile Smith-Rowe, saw that with Kieran Tierney. But with Martinelli, he's kind of been integral to this team. Liverpool legend Stevie Nicol, you heard him on the show. When Liverpool playing Arsenal, if he sees Saka and Martinelli on the team sheet, he knows it's going to be a tougher day in terms of competing with those guys, tracking those guys, having the energy to stay up with those guys over an entire 90 plus minutes. So assets are important. Some fans want to maybe sell other assets. PW's talking about Zinchenko, right? How much are we going to get for Zinchenko? Have we devalued him? Some fans think that we should move on Kivior, but look at Kivior, what he did and stepped up in the face of adversity, having to be a backup to Big Gabby, really stepped up. So we're kind of in this time and in this moment where in order for the club to evolve, in order for the team to evolve, in order for us to really truly compete at the highest level, you have to make tough decisions. And the big question is Gabriel Martinelli such an asset where we have to consider letting him go? I think that there are many of us that fall in love with players and we get attached emotionally. But if you think about the team, the squad improving, taking us to the next level, winning championships, winning Champions Leagues, really, truly elevating ourselves to that next playing field, I think we can improve on Martinelli. You know, I've been a huge fan. I've defended him. And at the beginning of the season when he was struggling, I found it a little bit distasteful how some Arsenal fans were talking about him. But we're at that moment right now where Mikel Arteta needs to be thinking critically as well. Like for him, this is a massive season coming up. You know, he has to win a trophy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. The club have to win a trophy. Then when you've got Timber and Saliba and Big Gabby and the emergence of Miles Lewis-Skelly, you've got such a reliable goalkeeper like David Raya. And then in the middle, you've got Declan Rice, the arrival of Zubimendi, Martin Odegaard, who didn't have a great season last year, but I think has earned the right to be that leader again next season. Injuries, maybe the creativity and the stifling of the defensiveness and the way Mikel Arteta set up the team was not conducive to players like Martin Odegaard. Suffered maybe from not having Saka. And then you look at the emergence of Martinelli over the last few seasons, but then maybe the lack of progress that we have seen in him. I think that's the toughest part. But at some point, you've got to cut the cord. It was hard to let Emile Smith-Rowe go. It's hard to let certain players go. But if you want to win and you want to improve, you've got to match that Saliba talent, the spine, right? Declan Rice, Saka, the striker position. We're in it to win it now. There's no there's no in between. And if Mikel is as ruthless with kind of players and the way he wants to play and the way he handles certain situations, this is going to have to be a really super ruthless decision. And maybe one of the hardest the club has had to make in a really, really long time. So what do you think? Let's see. Dean says it's time to let Martinelli go. What if Martinelli says no? I mean, that's a whole other fireball, isn't it? In the rise to the top, you will leave many a friend behind, says Elliot. PW says, unless Arteta changes tactics, whoever replaces him will be isolated like Martinelli. You know, at the beginning of the season, I was defending Martinelli because I was saying he's doing what the manager wants him to do. We want him to be this Brazilian flair player. But when you are told and tasked to win duels and track back and do all of the defensive work, which to the detriment of 4 players this season with hamstring injuries, we saw the results of that. So it's going to be difficult, yes. And I asked Kenny Ken that question. Does it make a difference if you get Sesko or Gyökeres or Rodrygo or Eze if Mikel's going to play the same kind of fearful football that he did last season? And that's a really big question. Newman, he doesn't deserve a yellow because he actually told me that he was going to be a little bit later. And, you know, he's doing a couple of bits right now on TalkSport, and he will be joining us as soon as he is done. Wilson says, love Martinelli, but if they offer as much as 65 to 80 and we can get Rodrygo or Leao, then yes, with sadness. There is no time for sentimentality at a big club, says Sean. And two Seans, lots of Seans in the house, spelled differently. There are other players that need to be sold before Martinelli. Who? Demsek says, the way a good Ramsdale went, why should Martinelli stay? Indeed. AFC always says, Arsenal were finished as a big club. The owners have no intention of trying to win and be the best, and that's absolutely helped by Arteta and his obsession with money spent on defensive players. Interesting. I mean, I think that in order to build on the squad, it would be great to keep Martinelli, but financially that may not be a possibility. But if you sell Martinelli, you bring in an Eze and a Rodrygo and a Sesko or a Gyökeres, surely that's a good window, isn't it? Let's have a look here. Dean says, you have to take into consideration that Martinelli may not want to go to Saudi. No doubt. Listen to Ryan. Get the likes up. Let's make sure that that you guys subscribe if you're just tuning in for the first time. Henri 1412 says, Sophie, we do make tough decisions. Buying Havertz, Madueke, Willian. Okay. I should have read that one before I put it up. A tough one here from Sean. Martinelli has been crap for the last 18 months. KRS says, Martinelli sell, buy Rodrygo. If you're going to sell a player like that, then you must make sure that whoever's coming in, you know, he is a Rodrygo type or an Eze type. Eze's got the Premier League experience. He comes with knowing the game. He single-handedly, along with Adam Wharton, you know, defeated Manchester City in the FA Cup final. Rodrygo unproven in the Premier League, but of course we know that he's got that world-class element to his game. Haven't seen the best of him lately at Real Madrid, but he hasn't been given the chances at Real Madrid. I think the Nico Williams ship has certainly sailed. There's other players that we're still connected to and involved with as well. But enough from me. Why don't we talk to the man of the moment, one of your favorites. He's back, Mr. Ben Jacobs. Welcome back to Squad Central. Ben, at ease, how you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. I think I'll give you a salute back. I like that. I know you do it every show, but I've decided to reciprocate your salute. It's good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you, Ben. And you broke some major news. Our listeners love you and are welcoming you. You and I talked just a few weeks ago about Martinelli. And also, just for our listeners, so they know, if there's one journalist out there that is ingrained in the game when it comes to Saudi, it's Ben, in terms of his connections, understanding the landscape, the way it works. It's a lot different, and there's intricacies to how transfers work and stuff. But Ben, this Martinelli, first it was Trossard, that kind of tempered down. Martinelli, a huge asset for the Arsenal. Everyone knows that we're interested in Rodrygo, that left side. We'll get to the other bits and bobs. But for now, what's the latest with regards to your story and Gabriel Martinelli?
Yeah, I'll give you all of the context because it is important. Just before I do, and I hope that Arsenal fans don't mind me saying this, I just want to, again, as I've done all day, going on broadcast talking about transfers, pay my respects to Diogo Jota and Andre Silva. I think it's important when you have tragic news that unites football to start by wishing condolences. It's been great to see the Liverpool fans lay all the tributes. In addition, Everton fans are turning up as well. And I know sometimes through social media, when this kind of tragedy happens and then you suddenly move on to transfers, people say that can be a bit cold or callous or inappropriate. So once again, I want to point out that the football world, Liverpool fans, journalists that have dealt with Diogo Jota and his brother Andre, we're rocked, we're sad. And it makes you realize that life is short. And I think it's important to send love and support to the family, to Liverpool supporters. And hopefully we get in the next few weeks a fitting tribute on and off the field. I know at the Women's Euros, it was really difficult for the Portugal women's players to be out there, and there was a minute's silence at the Club World Cup. We're going to have the same as well. Some Liverpool fans are saying retire the number 20 shirt. So it's really important, I think, to start coming on these kind of shows before we get into the Arsenal bits, to just send my respects and love to the family of Diogo Jota, his brother Andre Silva, and of course the Liverpool fans that may be listening to this show.
And Ben, thank you so much. I think maybe because I just did a show, and it remiss of me, I definitely should have started off by asking you about that. We had just done a segment on him, but you speak so beautifully and eloquently about, this really sad story today. And, one of the things real quick, Ben, before we do move on, is what we found is a lot of the times people talk about the football family. And we saw it here on this show with Super Kev and what the football family means. And in times like these, how people really truly prove they can come together, that there's more that unites us than divides us. And the outpouring from other clubs, from fellow fans, from the media has been nothing short of, I think, a huge comfort and a big hug. Of course, you're talking about parents who've lost 2 sons, a wife who's lost her husband, children who've lost their father. But that extended football family and the love that comes at times like this, I think proves why they put the beautiful in the game, and the beautiful game saying has come about over so many years.
Yeah, and what we are privileged as journalists to see is a little bit of the human behind the footballer. And I know from speaking to Liverpool fans that Diogo Jota in particular would send messages to Liverpool fans when they were going through hard times. I've been at training before where I'd seen Diogo Jota leave and there were big queues of people waiting, and he would always wind down the car window, sign autographs, pose for pictures. The same would happen as well post-match if people were waiting by the bus. And you can tell a footballer's character by how they treat the everyday fan. And Diogo Jota was always so humble, and it was the same when engaging with media as well. Countless times when he was told to wrap up speaking to journalists, he would continue for a little bit longer and try and answer as many questions as possible. And therefore, you start to understand this is not just a footballer, this is a likable human being. And in the case of Jota, let's not forget, prior to his tragic death, and his brother, who was his best friend as well, he'd had one of the months of his life. He'd won the Premier League, he'd won the Nations League, he'd got married. Just I think a day ago, or certainly within 48 hours, him and his beautiful wife had posted their wedding video, and Jota had replied to her, "I'm the luckiest person in the world." And now you have this stroke of tragedy and misfortune, and it just puts everything into perspective. And I think it's really important to use the platforms that we have, which is why all day I've been posting as many of the wonderful tributes as I can, and why when we did our own podcast, we led on Diogo Jota and Andre Silva, and we scrambled and we changed the running order to find guests and seat tributes and allow fans the ability to also make their own tributes and flash them up. So then you have an opportunity to be part of the immortalization of these two wonderful people and footballers. And that's why, regardless of the club and regardless of the podcast that I'm on, I always just like to start, before we get into the transfer news that people want to hear, by making sure that everybody understands the love and respect and condolences that I wish to pass on to Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva. And like I said before, the family and the wider Liverpool and Wolves and Porto and Portugal community.
Well said, Ben. Thank you for sharing that with us. Always classy from you. And, you know, that's the tough part, is that life does go on and our conversations, you know, continue. And, you know, the truth of it is that, you know, knowing my conversations with Super Kev when he wasn't well, you know, his biggest thing was, you've got to carry on. You've got to keep talking about football. You've got to keep marching forward, make sure you keep those squaddies in check and, you know, keep the channel going. And I know that you know, from the Liverpool side as well. You got to keep the legacies alive. They sacrificed a lot. You know, I know sometimes we give footballers a tough time and stuff like that, but the sacrifice to become an elite athlete, to play at that level, it comes with, you know, huge sacrifices from a young age. And Kev shared those stories with us from when he was a little boy. You know, he wanted to go out and play as a teen as well, but his goal was to become a professional footballer. But his message towards the end was all about keep talking, keep moving forward. And here we are, Ben, to keep moving and keep talking forward together.
Yeah, exactly. And now we can move on to Arsenal and Martinelli, but please do keep Diogo Jota and Andre Silva in your thoughts. It's obviously a tough time for everyone connected with Liverpool, and it's beautiful to see all of the tributes and all of the shirts and wreaths being laid at Anfield. But we can move on to Arsenal, which is probably what people actually have joined the stream for. But it has been great to see in the chat so many presumably predominant Arsenal fans also write very nice messages towards the Liverpool community.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've been busy. You and I have been corresponding. You're covering the Club World Cup as well, which is a little bit different. But of course, it's, you know, that time of year where everyone's moving and shaking or not. Arsenal fans in a panic about the fact that we haven't bought a striker yet. But that left side of our squad, Ben, is up for debate. Some fans feel like maybe it's time to move on Martinelli, especially if someone's offering 85 million euros. Trossard, you know, last time we spoke, there was a deal on the table for him. We haven't really heard too much. But the big news is Gabriel Martinelli and this Saudi offer, and the big thing from the squaddies as well. They're asking, well, what if, you know, Gabby doesn't want to go? But what's your understanding of the situation?
Yeah, let me clarify it, because sometimes things get a bit taken out of context on social media. So the Saudi FA decided to open the window today instead of July the 20th. And the reason for that is because Al Hilal, after beating Man City, wanted to sign Hamdallah, a prolific striker that scored 21 goals in the Saudi Pro League last season. He's at Al Shabab. So the player flies out to America. By the time he lands, the deal is done, and he's waiting to find out whether the Saudi FA are prepared to register him. No problem with the Club World Cup and the squad, but he actually can't play unless the Saudi window is open. So the Saudi FA said, okay, we'll help out Al Hilal and we'll move forwards our window by 17 days. So the Saudi window is now open. There's a point to this, so stay with me because it's complicated. Now the window is open. All of the clubs are saying, what's our budget? We're not going to wait 17 days. We're going to get going as well. And Al NASSR in particular are in for a huge summer. Cristiano Ronaldo has renewed. He's got equity in the club as part of his deal. So he can actually have a formal say on recruitment because he's got skin in the game. And Al NASSR want to sign a left winger. So what they've done, and it's different to approaching Arsenal or placing a bid, and this is the part that I think is being slightly misrepresented, which is why I wanted to come on and clarify. What they have done is go to the central deal makers and ask for 85 million euros in budget to start bidding. Because if they're going to bid, it has to be underwritten and they have to know they've got that budget. Now, whether or not that goes on Gabriel Martinelli remains to be seen. It could, but remember, Luis Diaz is also a top target, and Liverpool and Arsenal are kind of the same. Both clubs are saying they don't want to sell. Liverpool have actually told that explicitly to both Bayern and also Barcelona in the last 2 weeks, whereas Arsenal haven't had any offers or approaches, including from Al NASSR. So I've had a few people message me saying, did you report that Al NASSR have bid 85 million euros for Gabriel Martinelli? No. Did I even report that they will bid? No. But are they willing to spend 85 million euros on somebody? Yes. The targets are left wing, Luis Diaz, Gabriel Martinelli, and also in a more central area, Mohamed Kudus. And we have to wait and see whether they advance on that because Spurs are working on that deal. So time is ticking away there. And this is where we're at. So it could be Gabriel Martinelli. And if it is, Arsenal may have their resolve not to sell tested, because if you get that volume of money, then you have the ability to potentially go and sign a player like Rodrygo if he is open to a move. And that if will not be determined until after the Club World Cup. So we could see a domino effect here. Saudi window opening early, Ronaldo driving business along with the recruitment team, 85 million euros requested in central funding, Al Nassr getting ready to bid. But let's now see whether they do go down the Martinelli route, whether they try for Luis Diaz first, or whether actually they choose to rival Spurs and see whether they can persuade Mohamed Kudus to come to Saudi Arabia. And of course, there's other targets and positions as well. They want a defensive midfielder. Wilfred and Didi and Amadou Onana at Villa are two targets. So I think we'll get a clearer picture in the next 2 weeks, because now the window's opened, the Saudi clubs are scrambling because they were originally thinking we'll line up everything and then we'll start bidding on the 20th of July. And suddenly it's all been brought forwards, which has led to a bit of drama and a bit of panic, but perhaps not quite the clarity that some prospective sellers in Europe are looking for yet.
So Ben, is it your understanding that Luis Diaz is their number one priority and Martinelli would be second choice? Has that been made clear from Al Nassr at all?
Kind of, but obviously PIF clubs are for and central deal makers are everybody. So Al Nassr's top target is Luis Diaz, but Liverpool are rejecting everything outright at the moment. So they're either going to have to bid crazy money or they're going to get exactly the same message. And when you know from previous clubs' approaches that stance, I think Al Nassr are cautious on Luis Diaz. He may be idealistically the top target, but they're not going to try if they're consistently given a lack of encouragement, and therefore they'll have to understand whether Liverpool, like with Arsenal and Martinelli, have a genuine not for sale position or whether crazy money could change that. But yes, dream target wise, Luis Diaz is the top choice. But practically, because Arsenal are looking at left wingers and starting left wingers, there may be a scenario where Arsenal's position changes, but it would take crazy money because the starting position, and I think the position, if anyone other than Saudi came calling for Arsenal, is they don't want to sell Gabriel Martinelli. But like Liverpool and Diaz, is there a possibility? We don't know yet. The astronomical money, and I think 85 million euros, if it is that amount for Gabriel Martinelli, is astronomical money. Would that change Arsenal's perspective when you consider Rodrygo maybe 90 million euros? So if we're talking really simply, Martinelli going, and we're only speaking hypothetical now, and Rodrygo arriving, a lot of ifs and buts, the valuation, if it was that high for Martinelli, and if it sticks at 90 million euros for Rodrygo, they're not that far apart. So we are going to have to wait and see, because like I said to you before, usually with Saudi, you get a really clear picture of the direction of travel because they want the market to know they're ambitious and they're bidding. But this early window has actually caught everyone by surprise. And many clubs were waiting for their central budget, were waiting until the end of the Club World Cup, were waiting until the 20th of July. And really internally, they were strategizing about what the next steps are. Now the window's open, they're all scrambling because Al Hilal have known their budget since the beginning of the Club World Cup, simply because they were trying for players like Bruno Fernandes and Victor Osimhen before it. But every other club essentially was saying, we've got a little bit of money, but nowhere near money to sign a player like Gabriel Martinelli. And then the central funds dictate how aggressive they can actually be. And for those that want a sort of simple Saudi explainer, every single season, there's about 2 billion in funds on fees, but also wages and agent fees, split between the clubs, but not equally. So when you want a big name signing that you can't self-fund, and self-fund means fee, wages, agent fees. So even clubs like Al Nassr can't do that to a massive degree unless they're either bringing in money, which is why John Duran's departure to Fenerbahce is important, or they've generated money from sales. And this Saudi project is so formative that even if the clubs appear big, they don't have huge Premier League money. I was told that the likes of Al Shabab, Steven Gerrard's club, Al Ittifaq, they've got basically less than 10 million euros to work with. Al Nassr, Al Ittifaqs, Al Qadsiya's, Neom's, they're all at different levels. But even at the top extreme, you're probably not looking at more than 50 to 75 million euros all in for everything in terms of self-sustained funds. Al Hilal are probably the only ones with a bit more, because they've made a ton of money via the Club World Cup. So if you're suddenly saying 3-year contract for a player and a fee and agent fees to the tune of what might be 100 million euros deal or more, if you look at everything across the 3-year contract, the sign-on fee, the agent fee, the bonuses, you got to go to the central deal makers. And all these other clubs know the slice of the pie will not be equal. And it causes some contention in Saudi Arabia because an up-and-coming club may feel they're stifled in the market. You have Al Ittihad, who are the champions, and they may think everyone's funding Al NASSR at the moment because they want to pacify Ronaldo. So nobody's known up really until today exactly what kind of funding they're going to get. And then what further complicates it, and I know this is a big long rant, but it's important that people understand how Saudi actually works. Then you have the two-way aspect of what you're allocated, which may be smaller than what you like, and what you need, which may require you to go back to the central deal makers and say, can I have a little bit more? And often that's what clubs do. They line up their targets, they advance them on the player side, they work out that that footballer may want to join, and then they go back to the central deal makers and say, can I have a bit more pocket money? Because from that 2 billion, amounts are allocated, but it will never total the full pool available that season, allowing flexibility and leeway for clubs to have a two-way conversation and say, well, you're giving us 50 million, we need 100 million because this player wants to join. And then Michael Emenalo and various ministry officials will decide, are we going to top that up and give you more? And this is why the whole Saudi recruitment model is really very complicated. It's definitely not as simple as just saying a bid will be forthcoming or a bid will specifically be at 85 million euros. But that's the amount that Al Nassr want to now go and move in the market specifically on a left winger.
Right. 1,100 of you in live chat here on Highbury Squad Live with Ben Jacobs, talking about Martinelli and the Saudi situation. And also, Ben, the other thing too is when you look at Duran and his experience in the league and his move to Fenerbahce, and maybe for Gabriel Martinelli, you kind of sense, does he want to go? You know, is he motivated by the money? I mean, for Arsenal Football Club, when they're looking to like go to the next level, they've seen what they've seen with, you know, Gabby over the last few seasons. It's tempting. Does he have ambition? A lot of the times the narrative is if you go to Saudi, you don't have ambition. What's your take on, you know, what you hear regarding maybe him, you know, his people, the interest, you know, whether or not he's willing to kind of make that move to sacrifice maybe the European glory versus securing, you know, generational wealth for his family?
Yeah, and it's a World Cup year as well. That's another really important point to note too. Although it's interesting, Ivan Toney, for example, has been reintegrated into the England squad. So there's plenty of players in Saudi that are still getting capped for their countries, but there may be reservations about moving to a new league. Players also going to Saudi have an overnight change. So it's not just about what is or isn't the standard of football. And there's a lot of falsehoods about Saudi. And I think Al Hilal beating Manchester City is a win for the wider Saudi Pro League because it clearly shows you can build a competitive team. But you're also going from morning training to evening training, different language in the dressing room, later kickoffs. So you kind of have to go from being a morning person to a night owl. And I know a lot of players join, and if they don't stay long enough, Jordan Henderson's a good example, they get unsettled, they get jittery, and they leave. Whereas actually those that have had reservations, but maybe stick it out a bit longer, start to warm to it. And I think Duran's another good example. If he did another full year, he may have a very different perspective of Saudi Arabia. I have no information at this stage as to whether Martinelli wants to go. All I can tell you is that an approach to Martinelli to pitch the project happened in January. So he's been aware of Saudi interest for at least 6 months. But at this stage, we're not talking about NASSR reapproaching Martinelli with any kind of binding offer like they did to try and land Bruno Fernandes. And definitely there's been no bid or offer yet to Arsenal. So from Arsenal's point of view, it's a hypothetical. It's not something that has any substance yet. From Martinelli's perspective, he's aware that something may be forthcoming. And from NASSR's perspective, they're simply lining up their budget. How they spend it remains to be seen. because again, they've had to move everything to July the 1st, when originally they were taking these 2 weeks to decide their kind of order of who's feasible and who they want to bid for. And that's what's going to make the next few weeks really frantic, because these Saudi clubs don't want to hang around. They were having to wait, and they were kind of at a disadvantage in many ways, because Tottenham could sign Mohamed Kudus today and Al Nassr can't. Now it's a bit more of a level playing field. So let's see what direction Al Nassr go in. But at the moment, I don't have any clear steer as to whether Martinelli would be open. What I do have a clear position on is Arsenal's stance at the moment. Let's see if money changes it, should it arrive. But right now, Arsenal's stance is Martinelli is not for sale.
So let's talk about a player that you've been covering, although he hasn't been playing. And you are at the Club World Cup. You have been ingrained in the competition. The narrative is Rodrygo is on the bench, hasn't been starting. Xabi Alonso said a lot without saying too much. Of course, he's a huge asset, but when you look at the players that they have been, and the fact that he's not getting an opportunity to start at all, you talk about those players that Arsenal need to take them to the next level and elevate them, and, you know, finally maybe deliver a Premier League, let alone a Champions League. What's your take on the Rodrygo situation? If there was anything to happen, would Arsenal be in the driver's seat? Is this just kind of one of those mythical transfer narratives? Is he determined to remain a Real Madrid player? What's your understanding with your ear to the ground?
It's not mythical, it's very real. Arsenal like Rodrygo. He's very much a dream target. They just don't know if he wants to leave Real Madrid at this stage, and that conversation will not happen until after the Club World Cup. So Arsenal are respective of the fact that Real Madrid are in a big tournament and Rodrygo is part of that. And they are also respectful of the fact that Rodrygo doesn't want clarity on his future until after the Club World Cup. So this is not just about Arsenal and Real Madrid. This is about Rodrygo not wanting any distractions whilst he's in America, and Arsenal have to time any approach right, therefore. So I don't expect any movement until after Real Madrid either end their Club World Cup campaign by winning the thing or get knocked out. And then there will be a direct conversation specifically on Rodrygo's future between Rodrygo and his representatives and Real Madrid, with Xabi Alonso present. And Real, their executives, and Alonso know that this conversation is coming. Real Madrid are open to selling Rodrygo. That's my understanding, as I revealed a few weeks ago. And I believe that there were reports today backing up that information. And the number, I'm told, is 90 million euros, potentially 100 million if the structure is seen to be less preferable by Real Madrid. But at a cheaper end, I'm told a 90 million euros number is the kind of figure that Real would entertain. So if Arsenal are prepared to match that kind of valuation, I don't expect that many complications between Real Madrid and Arsenal, because my information is that Real Madrid are prepared to sell and happy to sell to Arsenal as well if they choose to advance it. So it really just all hinges on the player. Is he prepared to leave? Does he like Arsenal? Those kind of conversations haven't happened to any degree yet, because Arsenal want to be respectful of the fact that Rodrygo's focused on the Club World Cup. Of course, they've made some initial outreach. Of course, Rodrygo is aware that Arsenal are interested, but we'll only really find out if this develops after the Club World Cup. And the advantage...
Are there other clubs, Ben? Are there other clubs that do you think who would mount competition for Arsenal? Obviously, he's a desirable player.
Yeah, nobody major, though, at the moment, because Chelsea looked, but they've just signed Jamie Gittins for a package of 52 million. Liverpool have also held an interest, but haven't advanced anything as far as I'm aware. And their focus is going to be to find a starting number 9. And then you have Bayern, who also quite like Rodrygo, but their priority is Nico Williams. And yet Nico Williams' priority is Barcelona. Some say Rashford for Bayern as well. So it's kind of tough to tell what direction Bayern will go in, because they're still waiting on answers on some other targets. But whether they're able to fund that kind of outlay remains to be seen, because remember, Nico Williams has got a 58 million release clause. Marcus Rashford is 40 million. So give or take, Rodrygo is double the money. So I think if Arsenal chose to proceed, they might have a relatively clear run, which is the irony of signing a real superstar at this kind of level. There's only so many sides that can really afford to enter the race. Then in terms of context, I think the appeal of Rodrygo, other than being an insanely good footballer, is the fact that you can inverse what's happening at the moment at Real Madrid. So Rodrygo is unhappy because he's a right-sided winger and he wants to be a left-sided winger. And why is he a right-sided winger? Because you've got Vinny Jr. and Kylian Mbappe. So there's limited opportunities for him to play on the left-hand side. Arsenal is the opposite. They want a starting left winger that likely will require the exit of Gabriel Martinelli or Leandro Trossard. And remember something we spoke about on the last show, where with Trossard and Martinelli, I said, it's either extreme. Each of those players are either going to be extended or they're going to leave. Both aren't going to leave. Both could be extended. One could extend, one could go. But I don't see any middle ground where Arsenal will keep Trossard or Martinelli without the extension. And I can see a scenario where they're speaking to both about an extension, but still one of them is sold. And naturally, if you were to bring in a player like Rodrygo, you have the ability to then say you're the starting left winger. But if needed, under exceptional circumstances, such as a Saka injury or workload, he could move over to that right-hand side where he's also comfortable. And that might present a scenario where Arsenal could do Eze and Rodrygo if Martinelli or Trossard departs. And it's the same really with Noni Madueke as well. Even if they don't go down the line of Rodrygo, if you add Noni Madueke and he's prepared to be a competition to Saka, knowing that Saka will likely start when fit in all the big games, he can also go over to the left-hand side if needed. So therefore, these kind of profiles allow you to potentially add only one winger, a central attacking midfielder, if they end up proceeding with Eze and a number 9, as opposed to more defined one-sided wingers when suddenly you may choose to go for a starting left winger, a backup to Saka, still an attacking midfielder and a number 9, and then 4 need to come in. My sense is that if Rodrygo or Madueke joined, that might be enough as far as the wingers are concerned. It could be Madueke and then Martinelli and Trossard stay. It could be Rodrygo and Martinelli or Trossard go. And then maybe they say we don't need Madueke because if needed, Rodrygo can move over to that right-hand side and you've got Ranieri and, of course, Saka as well. So that's sort of the lay of the land where I think we're at the moment. But I'm not expecting clarity on whether Rodrygo is open to Arsenal until the Club World Cup ends.
Okay. So the meltdown definitely happened yesterday in the Arsenal stratosphere when, by the way, 1,400 of you in live chat right now. Thanks so much for joining. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And always keeping it respectful in our chat. Greatly appreciated from each and every one of you. Madueke sent the Arsenal universe into meltdown. On Monday, when you were going to be on, I was going to talk to you about Eze as well, Ben. Arsenal fans, no doubt, want Eze. They don't want another Chelsea. I say the word loosely, but you know what fans say. Reject. He's not a reject, of course. You've got some close ties on the Chelsea side. You've been covering a lot of what they've been doing so far this summer. It just seems to me that, and to some Arsenal fans, that the Madueke thing feels more like a Mikel Arteta thing than an Andrea Berta thing. Andrea Berta definitely feels more like the Rodrygo side of things, maybe even the Eze side of things. If Arsenal do this, I think there'll be a meltdown. But is it a reality? What's your take?
Well, they appreciate him, but they've not approached Chelsea or anything like that. Chelsea are also not forcing out Madueke, by the way. He's highly valued by Enzo Maresca. So it will just be whether a deal suits all parties at the right number. And then Chelsea would be prepared to entertain an exit. But it's appreciation at the moment. And as I said before, it may be that the Rodrygo saga, Madueke possibility go hand in hand, because if you did get encouragement on Rodrygo, knowing he can play on the right, do you need Noni Madueke still? Similarly, if Martinelli and Trossard are definitely staying, do they decide Rodrygo is too big an outlay or not feasible, and then turn their attention to a right-sided player that can move over the left-hand side? So I think we're getting a lot of ifs and buts because certain targets are linked to certain domino effects, and Arsenal don't yet have the clarity on a Madueke price or whether Rodrygo is willing to join. With Noni Madueke, I think Chelsea would like a 5 in the total package, if not a 6. That's my understanding. And therefore, this is not going to be a deal that comes cheap. I believe that Chelsea paid 29 million for Noni Madueke. It wouldn't surprise me if you include the add-ons, if double is necessary. And then Chelsea are going to be looking at, does Elanga go for over 60 million? What's the final fee? Should Manchester United get Mbeumo over the line? Cunha was 62.5 million. I know they're not all similar or identical profiles to Noni Madueke, but these kind of attackers moving within the Premier League would be used as a yardstick for valuation. So Noni Madueke is not going to be a bargain, not going to be cut price. And the reason for that is that he's a heck of a player. And I know that Arsenal fans may be looking at Kai Havertz in particular and saying, not another. But Havertz still had goals output for Arsenal and is valued by Mikel Arteta. And it wouldn't surprise me if he has an even better season next campaign. And Noni Madueke is young. He's powerful. He's a winger by name, but by nature, if you look at his output, he's basically a forward. And in the early part of last season, such as the game against Wolves, he was scoring for fun. And if he gets going under the right manager, he could be an incredible signing. Plus the fact that whoever arrives, if a right winger is to be signed, is not starting. Saka is your number one, right? So if you have Madueke for competition to come off the bench, to start certain games, to push Saka to compete with him, I actually think that's an outstanding balance. And you have to view Madueke as somebody that is not the finished product, has a high ceiling, has all the right attributes to thrive, whether at Chelsea or elsewhere. And that's why if he is to leave and Arsenal are to develop their interest in Madueke, they will have to pay a very serious price because they will be getting a very talented player.
I think he's also the type of player that if he was coming from, I don't know, Lyon or anywhere else, Arsenal fans might be a little bit more excited about him. But the Chelsea connection, again, just rubs Arsenal fans the wrong way. I'm going to ask you this before I get to like the main crux of, before we let you go, Ben. I got to ask you this. Is it your understanding, has Eze asked to leave Crystal Palace? Has he made it clear that he wants to move? Are there any rumblings of him doing that?
Eze's keen on Arsenal. I'm not aware that he's asked to leave Crystal Palace. I think he's highly respectful of that club. There's a clause there, £68 million all in, if Arsenal make an approach. And I think there's a realistic chance that they do bid. The likelihood is they'll go a little bit lower, or they'll offer a different kind of structure to the clause, which is complicated. It's payable in installments, but it's relatively difficult because I think some of the money goes to the player, some to Crystal Palace, and then some to his former club. And as a consequence, like with Michael Elise, if you're going to trigger the clause, you've got to walk through the front door, express your interest to Crystal Palace. They go to the player. The player's the one that formally has to trigger the clause in writing or say that he wants to leave. Then the club can come in. And this means that we may get a similar situation to Michael Elise, where either the player or Crystal Palace put a kind of soft deadline on expressions of interest and try and resolve it one way or the other. And remember, Palace with Elise had speculation he was going to leave before he actually did to Bayern 12 months earlier. And the end result was the player just signed a new deal. So I wouldn't rule out Crystal Palace fighting to keep. But what I can tell you is that the interest became concrete about 10 days ago. And this was a story that I broke. It was funny. I was on another show and the question to me was, there's been loads of rumors in the last 10 days about Eberechi Eze. Are they true? And I said, I hope so, because I broke that story. So if it's not true, then I've done a very bad job. But I think now it's been pretty backed up that Arsenal are serious about Eberechi Eze. And then the next part of the story after I broke it was a meeting at the weekend. And in that meeting were not just recruitment people, but senior football people from Arsenal pitching to the Eze camp. And this is not just, we like you, we might go for you. This was a discussion about numbers to try and work out on the Eze side what the expectations are and if it's feasible. And now we're going to have to wait and see whether a formal approach is made to Crystal Palace. I'm expecting a bid. I'm expecting that bid to be below the release clause, and I'm expecting that bid to be within the next 2 weeks or so. And then we'll find out, obviously, what Crystal Palace are looking for, if there's any flexibility outside of the release clause. But there's absolutely no doubt that if a club-to-club agreement is reached, Eze wants Arsenal. It's also worth noting that Tottenham have never seriously been in this race. They appreciate Eze, that's true, but have they moved on that? Have they gone to the player to any great degree, or have they approached Crystal Palace? No. So what looked like it might shape up as a bit of a North London derby for Eze a couple of weeks ago has actually become Arsenal advancing and Spurs moving on to Mohamed Kudus. And therefore, if Arsenal do choose to place that bid, which is my expectation, and should they reach an agreement with Crystal Palace, I'm not expecting personal terms with the player to be a problem.
The dominoes that the Arsenal fans want to fall. And don't worry, guys, I'm going to open it up to Ben to give us info on other players at the end here. But this is the one, Ben. We've talked about this together for a while now. It feels like maybe for some of the younger kids, but there was a show called Moonlighting back in the day, starring Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd, and it was the biggest dance of all, whether or not they were going to sleep together. Is you is or is you ain't was the famous line. And for the Generation Xers in the house, I think you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The domino that we want to fall. What is going on with the striker position for the Gunners?
Yeah, Andrea Berta loves to advance deals simultaneously. I think it's just worth being honest with people in your reporting rather than looking for clicks, which is why I keep saying that Šeško, Gyökeres, who knows, maybe Ollie Watkins, they're all being leveraged against each other because Arsenal want to do one thing. They want to sign either Victor Gyökeres or Benjamin Šeško at 70 million euros. So Gyökeres leaving for the Pact, Šeško 10 to 15 million below this variable performance-related release clause. And the only way you can really do that is by getting player buy-in from both. Gyökeres open to Arsenal. Šeško wants Arsenal, even started following them on social media. Then when you go to the clubs, you got player buy-in. And if they don't drop their price, you've got another deal that you can do. We've heard some reports in the last 48 hours that Arsenal are advancing on Gyökeres or have agreed terms with him or have bid to Sporting. We've heard suggestions in the last month that Šeško is basically done. And again, I've been very cautious in my reporting because the way Andrea Berta works is very different to that of Edu. Edu would have picked one by now and would be meticulously working on that deal and probably would have placed 3 or 4 bids, each only going up slightly to be really disciplined, knowing that if he had the player buy-in, he might be able to get it over the line. Berta's far more bullish and overt. He's a bit of a maverick in the market. And he'll be saying, if we don't get Gyökeres, we'll go for Šeško. If we don't get Šeško, we'll go for Gyökeres. And I bet you anything right now that neither Leipzig or Sporting know the true reality. And this is why it's very difficult to tell you in black and white if it will be Šeško or Gyökeres. But what I can tell you in black and white is Arsenal want to do both those deals for around 70 million euros and no higher. Then, if neither come off, you've still got Watkins. But I think that Villa, because they've just sold their women's team to satisfy their PSR concerns, will be really quite bullish themselves and will hold out for 60 million plus. And remember, in January, Arsenal's bid was only 40 million. So there's probably a gulf in valuation there. The original anticipation when the window opened was that Arsenal were leaning towards Šeško because that was all the legwork. Berta kind of brought Gyökeres to the table. And I do think that the direction of travel that Arsenal move will basically be down to price. The other thing I would just add is it may feel like, why is there no clarity and movement when we're a month into the window and Liverpool have signed Wirtz and Chelsea have signed Delap and Manchester City have got Cherki? Because wasn't the whole point that once we get a little bit of movement with one striker or one attacker, everyone else's window will be clear? But what I can tell you is partly because the financial year begins on July the 1st and partly because Andrea Berta is relatively new to the football club, Arsenal were always looking at their window as getting going in July. So Zubimendi, Norgard, Mosquera talks, it's kind of a bonus. And some of the reason why they were able to get Zubimendi pre-agreed was because of Edu anyway. So Berta kind of inherited that deal. But striker, left winger, attacking midfielder, possibly right winger, all of these were things that Arsenal were always looking to put the outlay and their work in July to give Berta time to speak to people in the market. Whereas Kepa was just a no-brainer at 5 million. Zubimendi was pre-agreed. Mosquera, 15 to 20 million euros if it gets done and there's optimism. These are things that can be advanced earlier because they're either simpler deals or they're deals that Arsenal committed to under Edu and Jason Atu. Whereas the really big box office ones that are to get Arsenal fans excited in attacking positions were always, to my understanding, January deals. So if Arsenal fans want a little bit of calmness and reassurance, I would say view the window as a month open for your defender, goalkeeper, central midfielder, but view the window as 3 days open for these attacking targets. And actually, I think you'll see very quickly now Berta moving fast in July for the kind of profiles that Arsenal are looking for. But I was never really expecting clarity on the striker situation in the month of June.
That makes sense. Okay, so lots of people, 1,600 of you in live chat. Thank you so much for joining and listening to Ben. And what I love about, and Morgie, you're right, is the way Ben explains this, that you understand that these transfers, these deals, they're not easy to get over the line, especially in a competitive marketplace, especially in a marketplace where you've had to kind of hold the mayo and the mustard in order to make sure that you move forward, that doesn't financially hurt the club, you know, in the next window, the window after that. And I know that we all want a striker, and hopefully that will happen in the coming weeks. But Ben, is there a player? There's a lot of questions about Ekitike, Hato, other players who might be on the radar, who might have been in the narrative of Arsenal interest that fans should be paying attention to or not?
Yeah, first of all, when I said the window will get going, I said June. I, of course, meant July.
July, yeah.
So that doesn't get quoted wrongly on social media. Ben Jacobs says on the 3rd of July that Arsenal's window is really going to get going in June. They'll be accusing me of saying June 2026 if I'm not careful. But I think if we remove the attackers that we've mentioned, we should definitely still keep an eye on Arsenal and defenders, a versatile centre-back that can play left-back, maybe even another specialist left-back. And that's where revisiting last summer's interest in Joel Hato might be one to watch. I think Hato will go somewhere, could be Liverpool, but they're also looking at Mark Gahey. Arsenal have decided not to pursue Mark Gahey because they can't really offer him the game time that he's looking for. But Gahey, again, is a different kind of player to Hato. So the advantage of Hato is he's comfortable at centre-back, he's comfortable at left-back, he's in that Calafiori mould, therefore. And that's the kind of young profile that I think Arsenal could also move on as well. So could be one to watch. But the main bulk of business now will be an attack. And that, for me, is the kind of paradox in all of this, that, of course, because the number 9 hasn't arrived, it feels like Arsenal's window hasn't got going. And because a left winger hasn't arrived and people like the idea of Rodrygo or Anthony Gordon, that's not happened. And then there's been a long-standing desire, even with Nwaneri, to bring cover on the right-hand side. And Eze hasn't resolved itself, but is definitely advancing positively, at least on the player side. So you could kind of go, they haven't done the main things they're supposed to do. But if you add Norgard, Kepa, Zubimendi, should Mosquera arrive, then that's half the volume of business. Because if it turns out that 3 more attackers come in, a number 9, and let's just call it a left wing and an attacking midfielder, then you've already added several new players, and outgoings may be necessary to keep the squad size down. So if we're talking away from the attackers that we've spoken of, it might only be 1 more, some kind of versatile defender. And then if they get that box office left winger, if they add Eze, if they add a number 9, then suddenly the window could have a very different complexion on it, because you might be in mid or late July, or certainly the first game of the season. And if these names come in and we're starting to see concrete targets for each of those positions, then maybe it won't be a case of a long old window. Maybe it will be a case of Berta going out in the market and within the next 6 weeks or so, getting the bulk of that business done. And then always what happens is after a signing comes in, fans say, who's next? Who's next? Who's next? But if you're going to bring in 6 or 7, I'd be surprised if it's any more than that at Arsenal this summer. And if they can get that 6 or 7 before the first game of the season, then Arsenal fans can just get excited about the new season and stop stressing about the window in its final few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal fans definitely want players in before, especially when you look at the start of our Premier League schedule, Ben. It's a tough one. And, you know, they want a Gyökeres in, or they want a Sesko in. Of course, you know, Eze is a player that we've talked about and we much admire. And then you've got to look at giving them time to sell players. Real quick before the Fabio Vieiras of the world, I'm going to say this name out loud, the Lokongas, outgoings to bring in other than Martinelli, any Zinchenko, Kivior, any news on Arsenal outgoing business?
Yeah, not a great deal of news at the moment because they have been focused on incomings, and even with the financial year close, it's not like they've needed certain players that you mentioned to leave. Lokonga, I think, goes. Obviously, the feeling is Zinchenko will depart if a player like Joro Hato comes in. And that was always my understanding at the beginning of the window, that Kieran Tierney and Alexander Zinchenko may be the ones to depart. There's some formative interest in Zinchenko from both Saudi Arabia and Turkey. I don't know whether he's interested in either of those or would prefer to stay in Europe. Thomas Partey is obviously the outgoing that was a definite outgoing, then might have extended and is once again now a definite outgoing, which is why obviously Norgard has come in. And that's the sort of lay of the land at the moment as far as Arsenal are concerned. I think if it isn't Martinelli, even though Trossard has been in positive contract extensions, until that's signed, you never know. There might be a possibility that he departs as well. And then from there, I think we'll see quite a lot of stability within the Arsenal squad because Mikel Arteta is happy with the core squad. So this is really about not making that many changes, even though when you spell them all out, it sounds like a lot. But some of the changes may be more internal for certain players as a knock-on effect of other signings. So when we think about the midfield, for example, Zubimendi comes in, he's an out-and-out 6. Does that give Declan Rice the opportunity to push further forwards? If Eze joins, he'll be the most furthest forwards in the midfield and will have all of the freedom. But where does that leave Martin Odegaard in terms of his role and his minutes? And he is still the Arsenal captain. You've got Wanyeri. If Madueke comes in, where does that leave him in the pecking order? And is there a conversation to be had about pathways and minutes? So I think Mikel Arteta will be looking less about core squad outgoings other than the players that are just surplus to requirements, and more about how these new signings are going to affect the role, the future of others. And building that chemistry will be really important in the early part of pre-season, which is why Arsenal want to do their business quickly. So get in a number 9 as soon as you can, because then you can actually work out how that number 9 operates with the rest of the squad. If you're going to bring in a starting left winger, communicate that to either Martinelli or Trossard, because one of them might have to go. If you're not going to get a left winger, which one of Martinelli and Trossard is going to be your predominant starter? And if you're signing Noni Madueke, are you actually telling him you're going to get quite a bit of time on the left-hand side? Because if you were Madueke, you'd be saying, I'm not going to displace Saka, but if Arsenal are telling me I might stand a chance of starting regularly on the left-hand side and occasionally on the right-hand side, is that a selling point to the player? And does he think he can actually move above Martinelli or Trossard on that left-hand side, even though his favourite position is the right? So I think it's less about our box office Arsenal players going to leave and more how our existing Arsenal starters and important players going to be affected by some of these names, either that are in, like Zubimendi, or will come in the course of the next few weeks.
Yeah, and with Martinelli, and of course there's the homegrown thing too that needs to be taken into consideration as well, Ben. And of course, you know, some Arsenal fans, this is hilarious. They're hilarious. Jay, how are we so sure Zubimendi is an Arsenal player? I guess until you see him holding up the shirt with his video. But listen, Graham Hunter, Sammy Mockbell, Ben Jacobs, many have talked about Zubi is a gooner. But, you know, sometimes those videos take a long time to produce, Ben, don't they?
Yeah, announcement videos, and I think also just a respect for Sociedad. So my understanding is essentially that Zubimendi was near pre-agreed in January. It was pre-agreed when I broke. There was an agreement in principle. So again, I stand by my own exclusive information at the time saying there's an agreement in principle, but they want to put that deal on this financial year. And because of the terms and going slightly above the release clause to make it doable, they'll want to formalize that in July. So we're kind of just 3 days in to the formalization part. And then you have to understand, does Sociedad want you to say you've got the pre-agreement, or do they want to wait until July? Do they want to wait until they get the first installment? Do they want to do their own goodbye first and have you delay it? Then you have to factor in, has the player gone on holiday? And is he going to return after that holiday and then only film the announcement videos? And then other little things as well, like who's to say Arsenal didn't want to announce it? This is obviously just hypothetical, but many clubs with announcements, and maybe Arsenal are one of them, might have been ready to announce this morning. And then you have to be respectful of the very sad news about Diego Jota and Andre Silva. And maybe you decide it's not the right time and the right day. With Jamie Gittins and Chelsea, it was down to the fact that Dortmund were in the Club World Cup. Chelsea were in the Club World Cup. Dortmund had a game. So Chelsea didn't want to announce it in match day -2, match day -1, or the day that Dortmund played. And then they allowed Dortmund to announce it today, the day after they've played a football game. So when things are done and when things are announced are two completely separate things. And as journalists, we only really have control over when to report we believe the deal is done. And I believe the deal with Martin Zubimendi is done. He's not going to Real Madrid. He is an Arsenal player. But when that announcement takes place is totally out of my control. And I have no information as to when Arsenal will finally confirm he's an Arsenal player. But I tell you something, if he's not an Arsenal player, somehow it will be the craziest transfer saga of all time.
That's what Sammy Mockbell said too. Absolutely. Yeah. And you've been on this from the get-go too. Norgard next, Ben, real quick. Do you think he's the next announcement?
Yeah, my understanding with Norgard is the first part of the medical has already been done, and then he's gone away to Denmark and he'll come back early next week. I've got no indication yet of when the full medical will be completed, but the formalities are already underway there. So it's just a case of actually completing them in full, because the medical in full has not yet been done to my knowledge. And then at some point next week, I would imagine he will return to formalize that deal, and then it will be announced. So we're not quite over the line yet, but the full agreement is in place club to club. The player terms are also verbally agreed, but the sort of formalization, the medical, the paperwork, not done yet. And it wouldn't surprise me if that runs into the middle of next week.
Ben, what's your parting message for the squaddies? There's over 1,600 of them in live chat. A huge audience for us this evening, thanks to you joining the show to talk about Martinelli and Eze, Rodrygo, Norgard, Hato, everyone, basically. I know that, patience is a virtue for sure. And we do have a really good squad. Of course, the injuries affected us last season. We saw that in the Premier League. We lost our luster, had a great run in the Champions League. What's your message, with your ear to the ground in Club World Cup and everything that's going on, to Arsenal fans?
Well, I think, as I've said right at the beginning of the window, judge the window at the end of the window, not now. And at the end of the window, the Arsenal spend will, in my opinion, be very similar to the Liverpool spend. The Arsenal ambition will be similar to the Liverpool ambition. The Arsenal volume of transfers will be very similar to the Manchester City volume of transfers. The squad will get its number 9. It's not like Gyökeres or Šeško are going elsewhere at the moment, so they're not losing out to rival suitors. And that's where sometimes you see Liverpool sign Wirtz or Chelsea get Delap. And many Arsenal fans go, why didn't we go for Wirtz? Or how can Chelsea get Delap so quickly and we still don't have a number 9? You don't need your number 9 today, tomorrow. Of course, it's preferential if they can come in for pre-season, but you need your number 9 by game 1 of the new Premier League season, and you need your players by the end of the window. So if, as I'm told, Arsenal want to do the bulk of their business in July, you're 3 days into that period, and you've already got Zubimendi, Mosquera stands a good chance. Norgard is going to get done. Kepa's already arrived. How many Premier League clubs have basically got 4 signings over the line by July the 1st? And if you were to add 3 more and 3 big important signings, Eze stands a decent chance in my opinion. Let's wait and see if Arsenal bid. Rodrygo could be box office. There's Anthony Gordon there as well. And then still a number 9 coming in. To me, I'm not an Arsenal fan. It all just sounds incredibly positive and exciting. And a lot of people may be throwing their toys out the pram now, might in 3 or 4 weeks' time be looking back at some of those comments today and thinking, wow, now I understand what Andrea Berta is all about. So I think it's going to be a big window, a statement window for Arsenal. And whoever comes in, they will buy a winger. They will buy an attacking midfielder. And they will finally get that number 9 that they've been craving for multiple windows in the past. So my message for Arsenal fans is to judge Andrea Berta at the end of the window, or certainly by the first game of the Premier League season, and not now, because things now are going to move so quickly that if you judge now, you might wake up tomorrow or the next day and be like, oh, we have now moved on Eze. We do now understand if Rodrygo is available. We have finally placed a bid for a number 9. So a bit of patience is needed. And then my broader message is just, if you are fretting and angry about the window, just remember today's tragic news, because football means nothing in the context of life. So go away, turn off social media, ignore us journalists, kiss your wife or your husband or your children, reach out to a Liverpool fan and check if they're okay, because football means nothing. The window means nothing. The frantic and chaotic nature, the banter between fans, the frustration of not getting your signings, it means 0 if you can't go away and appreciate the bigger joys of life that sadly and tragically were taken away from Diego Jota and Andre Silva. So my message is the window is fun and dramatic and wonderful. Enjoy it. These conversations are what bring us all together. But don't get so stressed that you have a bad day or that you forget about your family and your friends, or you can't switch off, because life can be taken away from anybody in a second. And we must unite with the Liverpool family and the Jota family to make sure that these little things, as much as we love them, as much as they please us or frustrate us, they're only transfers, it's only football. And we've all been sent a message today that there are bigger and more important things in life. So yes, let's hope Arsenal have a great window, but don't over stress about it to the point where it ruins your day today.
Yeah, very well said. And I tell you, we learned on this show and on this Dickie Bow Thursday, well said, and we thank you. And Super Kev would be saying exactly the same thing as well. And we appreciate you, Ben. If you're not following Ben, please make sure that you do. Kenny was on earlier. Go check that show out at Jacobs, Ben. He very graciously comes on the show in his free time. We appreciate him. We are so grateful to you for everything. And we look forward, Ben, to more conversations as the summer ensues. And, along the way, maybe you could do me a favor, mate. I'd appreciate putting a word for this guy, and then we can call it quits. Okay.
Wow, what a signing that would be. I make no promises, unfortunately. I have no control over anybody's transfers. I just hound people, work hard, try and bring you the information, but I have no control about who goes where.
No, I know. And for those listening on audio, I just put a picture up of Isaac. Listen, I'll let Ben's words are the best way to end the show. Thanks to everyone. Please hit the like button on your way out. Thanks to all 1,600 of you that tuned in live today at E Squaddies. And don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. Have a good one.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
So much, everyone. See you soon. Take care and hit the like button, please, on the way out. Much appreciated. At ease, everyone. Love you lots.